The white judge finds black woman, only to learn she's a courtroom specialist part. It was just another Tuesday morning in Oakshire Crown Court. Judge Robert Fletcher sat tall behind his polished bench, his gray wig perfectly positioned, his black robes crisp. The courtroom was busy as usual, full of nervous people waiting their turn. Judge Fletcher was known for running his court with strict rules and perfect timing. Maria Thompson rushed through the heavy wooden doors at 9:15 a.m., 15 minutes after. Her case was called. She wore a smart navy suit, her hair neatly pulled back. The room fell quiet as she walked quickly to the front. Judge Fletcher looked down at her with cold eyes. "Ms. Thompson," he said loudly, "you are late. This court starts at 9 o'clock sharp, not whenever you decide to join us." Maria opened her mouth to explain, but Judge Fletcher raised his hand to stop her. "I do not accept excuses. Your lateness shows disrespect to this court and wastes everyone's time. I am adding a $250 fine for contempt of court in addition to your traffic offense." The court clerk looked surprised. This punishment seemed harsh for someone who was just 15 minutes late. But no one dared question Judge Fletcher's decisions. Maria said nothing. She simply nodded and paid the fine without argument. Unlike most people who stood before Judge Fletcher, she didn't look scared. She seemed calm, almost as if she had expected this. "May I request a brief meeting with you after court today, Your Honor?" Maria asked politely. Judge Fletcher raised an eyebrow. "You may see me in my chambers at 4 p.m., Ms. Thompson." Not a minute later. The judge moved on to the next case, but he felt strangely unsettled by the woman's calm manner. Most people either got angry or started crying when he fined them. This woman had done neither. The day continued as normal. Judge Fletcher handled case after case with his usual efficiency. By late afternoon, he had almost forgotten about Maria Thompson until his clerk reminded him of the 4 p.m. meeting. At exactly 4 p.m., there was a knock on his chamber door. Maria Thompson entered, carrying a brown leather folder. Judge Fletcher pointed to the chair across from his desk. "Make this quick, Ms. Thompson. I have dinner plans." Maria sat down and placed her folder on the desk. She opened it to reveal official papers with government seals. "Judge Fletcher, I should introduce myself properly. I am Dr. Maria Thompson, head of the Judicial Review Committee. I was deliberately late to your court today as part of our assessment program." Judge Fletcher's face flushed red as she handed him her identification card and official letter. "For the past 6 months, our committee has been reviewing patterns in judicial behavior across the country. We attend court sessions, sometimes arriving late or breaking minor rules, to observe how judges respond to different types of people." Judge Fletcher stared at the papers, his mouth slightly open. The woman he had just fined $250 was not only a qualified lawyer but also a respected judge from the High Court, who specialized in identifying bias in the justice system. "You were testing me?" he asked, his voice suddenly less confident. "Observing, not testing," Maria corrected gently. "And today's observation was just one of many data points we're collecting." Judge Fletcher felt his stomach tighten as he realized what had just happened. His quick judgment might have revealed more about himself than he was comfortable facing. "Perhaps," Maria suggested, "we should discuss this further. I have some findings that might interest you." Part 2. Judge Fletcher sat at his desk, gripping his teacup too tightly as Dr. Maria Thompson opened her laptop. The screen lit up with colorful charts and numbers. "Over the past 3 months, we've gathered data from 50 courts across the country," Maria explained. "We track things like fines, jail time, and bail amounts. We look at how these change based on who stands before the judge." She turned the screen to face him. Judge Fletcher saw his name at the top of a chart. The bars showed clearly that he gave higher fines to women of color compared to white men for the same offenses. "This can't be right," he said, his voice shaking slightly. "I treat everyone the same." "Most bias isn't on purpose," Maria said kindly. "That's what makes it hard to spot in ourselves." She clicked to another screen. "Look at these numbers from last month. When white men were late to your court, you gave an average fine of $75. When women or people of color were late, your average fine jumped to $220. Judge Fletcher felt his face grow hot. He had always seen himself as fair. His father had been a coal miner and he had worked hard to become a judge. He believed in rules and thought he applied them equally. "I don't look at color or gender when I make decisions," he insisted. "Our minds notice these things even when we don't mean to," Maria replied. "It's called implicit bias. We all have it." Judge Fletcher stood up and walked to the window. Outside, people hurried home in the evening light. For 30 years, he had believed he was serving justice fairly. Now this woman was showing him data that suggested otherwise. "Why show me this?" he asked finally. "Why not just report me?" Maria closed her laptop. "Because most judges care about justice. When shown these patterns, the best judges want to change." Judge Fletcher turned to face her. "And you think I'm one of the best judges?" "I think you could be," she answered honestly. "Your knowledge of the law is excellent. Your courtroom runs well. But true justice needs more than just knowing the law." She stood and handed him a blue folder. "This contains exercises and tools many judges find helpful. It also has information about a workshop next month." Judge Fletcher took the folder but didn't open it. "Why should I trust you? You tricked me." "I observed you in your natural environment," Maria corrected. "Just like scientists studying animals don't tell the animals they're being watched." Despite himself, Judge Fletcher almost smiled at the comparison. "Tell me something," he said. "Were you actually late on purpose?" Maria nodded. "My team and I use consistent scenarios across all courts. Sometimes we're late. Sometimes we dress differently. Sometimes we speak with different accents. We track how these things affect treatment." Judge Fletcher sighed deeply. "And I failed." "Your test, It wasn't a test with pass or fail," Maria said gently. "It was an observation. And now you have a choice about what to do with this information." She packed her things and moved toward the door. "The workshop is on the 15th next month. Many excellent judges will be there working to become even better." After she left, Judge Fletcher sat alone in his chambers for a long time. The blue folder sat unopened on his desk. Part of him wanted to throw it away and forget this uncomfortable meeting. Another part knew he couldn't unsee what he had been shown about himself. Finally, he opened the folder and began to read. Part 3. The workshop room buzzed with quiet conversation. 20 judges from across the country sat in small groups around tables covered with papers and coffee cups. Judge Fletcher stood awkwardly by the door, feeling out of place. He almost turned to leave when he spotted Maria walking toward him. "Judge Fletcher, I'm glad you came," she said, offering her hand. "Let me introduce you to some of the others." She led him to a table where 3 other judges sat. "This is Judge William Taylor from Liverpool, Judge Elizabeth Andrews from Bristol, and Judge Alan Morris from Manchester. Everyone, this is Judge Robert Fletcher from Oakshire." They greeted him warmly, and Judge Andrews pulled out a chair. "First, time?" she asked with understanding eyes. Judge Fletcher nodded as he sat down. "I wasn't sure about coming." "None of us were," Judge Morris said with a small laugh. "It's not easy to face our own blind spots." Before Judge Fletcher could respond, Maria called the room to attention. The workshop began with each judge receiving a folder of case studies. These were real cases with all names and identifying details removed. Each judge was asked to decide on an appropriate sentence based only on the facts provided. After an hour, they compared their decisions. The differences were striking. For nearly identical cases, the sentences varied widely. "This is what happens when we rely on gut feelings rather than clear guidelines," Maria explained. "Our backgrounds, experiences, and yes, our biases fill in the gaps." After lunch, they watched videos of actors playing defendants in court. The actors said exactly the same words but varied in gender, age, and race. The judges were asked to rate how trustworthy each defendant seemed. Judge Fletcher was shocked to see his own ratings. He had scored young black men as less trustworthy than others, even when they said exactly the same words. "This can't be right," he muttered. Judge Andrews leaned over. "I felt the same way when I first saw my results 6 months ago. It's hard to accept." During a coffee break, Judge Fletcher found himself standing next to Judge Taylor, a man with 40 years on the bench. "How do you handle this?" Judge Fletcher asked quietly. Finding out you've been unfair without knowing it. Judge Taylor stirred, his coffee slowly. With humility, he said, I spent 35 years thinking I was a model of fairness. Then my daughter, who's a lawyer, showed me similar data about my own courtroom. It was the hardest thing I've ever faced about myself. What did you do? I got angry. Then I got sad. Then I decided to do better, Judge Taylor said simply. We can't change the past, but we can change how we move forward. In the afternoon session, Maria introduced tools to help reduce bias. One was a checklist to use before making decisions. Another was a practice of writing down reasoning in detail. A third was regular data review of patterns in their courtrooms. The goal isn't to feel guilty, Maria told them. The goal is to become aware so you can make conscious choices rather than unconscious ones. As the workshop ended, Judge Fletcher felt both drained and strangely hopeful. He had always prided himself on being fair. Now he knew that true fairness required more work than he had realized. Same time next month? Maria asked as he gathered his things. I'll be here, Judge Fletcher replied, surprising himself with how much he meant it. Part 4. Back in his courtroom, Judge Fletcher sat at his bench, watching the day's cases with new eyes. A young man in a worn jacket stood before him, charged with shoplifting food. 6 months ago, Judge Fletcher would have quickly handed down the standard fine without much thought. Today, he paused. Tell me your situation, he said, surprising his clerk and the lawyers present. The young man looked up, startled. I lost my job 3 weeks ago, Your Honor. I have 2 children at home. The benefits haven't started yet, and we ran out of food yesterday. Judge Fletcher nodded slowly. Thank you for your honesty. The law still says what you did was wrong, but I believe in fair justice that considers all facts. Instead of a fine the man clearly couldn't pay, Judge Fletcher ordered community service and connected him with the court's support officer to help with benefit applications and food bank referrals. Later that day, he noticed his clerk, Peter, watching him curiously. Something different about you these days, sir, Peter said while organizing the afternoon files. Is there? Judge Fletcher asked, pretending not to understand. You're taking more time with each case. Asking more questions. It's good if you don't mind me saying so. Judge Fletcher smiled slightly. I don't mind at all. At home that evening, Judge Fletcher started a new habit. He opened a journal and began writing about each case he had handled that day, focusing on his reasoning and any feelings that might have influenced him. When finished, he reviewed his notes, looking for patterns and blind spots. The monthly workshops continued. Judge Fletcher now looked forward to them, even becoming friends with Judges Taylor and Andrews. They often called each other when facing difficult cases, providing outside perspectives. One Tuesday morning, almost exactly 6 months after their first meeting, Dr. Maria Thompson appeared in Judge Fletcher's courtroom again. This time she sat quietly in the back row, observing. Judge Fletcher noticed her immediately but continued with his cases. He watched her take notes as he worked through a busy morning docket. During the lunch break, Maria knocked on his chamber door. I hope you don't mind my visit, she said. I'm collecting follow-up data. Not at all, Judge Fletcher replied, offering her a chair. How am I doing? Maria smiled. Your data shows significant changes. Your sentences are more consistent across different groups. Your courtroom atmosphere is notably more respectful. People feel heard even when decisions go against them. She handed him a folder with charts similar to those she had shown him 6 months earlier. The difference was striking. The wide gaps between how he treated different groups had narrowed considerably. Perfect fairness may be impossible, Maria said, but meaningful improvement clearly isn't. Judge Fletcher studied the charts. I still catch myself sometimes making assumptions or rushing to judgment. The difference is now I notice it happening. That awareness is the most important step, Maria replied. You can't fix what you don't acknowledge. As she left, Judge Fletcher felt a quiet pride. Not because he had become perfect. He knew he never would be, but because he had been willing to change. He had faced an uncomfortable truth about himself and chosen to grow rather than deny it. That evening, he called his daughter for the first time in months. Their relationship had been strained since her university days when she accused him of being rigid and judgmental. Perhaps it was time to bring his new understanding of listening and fairness home as well. Part 5. 1 year had passed since Dr. Maria Thompson had first walked into Judge Fletcher's courtroom. Today, they stood together on a small stage at the National Judicial Conference. The large hall was filled with judges from across the country, all waiting to hear about the program that had started with just one courtroom and had now spread to over 50. Judge Fletcher looked out at the sea of black robes and felt a strange mix of pride and humility. A year ago, he would never have imagined standing here, certainly not speaking about his own mistakes and growth. "Good morning," he began, his voice steady. "My name is Judge Robert Fletcher. For 30 years, I believed I was one of the fairest judges on the bench. Then Dr. Thompson here showed me data that proved I was wrong." A murmur ran through the crowd. Most judges didn't admit mistakes easily. "The numbers didn't lie," he continued. "I was giving harsher sentences to certain groups without even realizing it. When faced with this truth, I had two choices: deny it or change. I chose to change." Maria stepped forward then, explaining the program they had developed together. It combined data tracking, regular feedback, and practical tools judges could use every day. Judge Fletcher shared his own experience, including the journal he kept and the checklist he used before making decisions. The most important step, he told the audience, was learning to slow down. Justice isn't meant to be rushed. Each person deserves to be truly seen and heard. After their talk, many judges came up to ask questions. Some seemed defensive, others curious. One older judge pulled Judge Fletcher aside. "Brave talk," he said. "But aren't you worried this makes judges look bad, like we can't be trusted?" Judge Fletcher considered this. "I think it makes us look human," he answered finally. "And showing that we're willing to improve makes the system stronger, not weaker." That evening, Judge Fletcher hosted a small dinner at his home. His daughter Amy was there with her husband. So were Judges Taylor and Andrews, who had become good friends. Dr. Thompson came with her husband, a teacher. The conversation flowed easily as they shared stories and laughed. After dinner, Amy helped her father clear the plates. In the kitchen, she paused. "Dad," she said quietly, "I need to tell you something." Judge Fletcher turned to his daughter, noting the serious look on her face. "The day Dr. Thompson came to your court wasn't completely by chance," Amy admitted. "I had written to the Judicial Review Committee months earlier. I told them about arguments we'd had, about how you couldn't see your own blind spots." Judge Fletcher stared at his daughter, surprised. "You were behind all this?" Amy nodded nervously. "Are you angry?" Judge Fletcher was quiet for a moment. Then he smiled softly. "How could I be angry? You helped me become a better judge. More importantly, you helped me become a better person." He pulled his daughter into a hug. "Thank you," he whispered. Back in the dining room, glasses were raised, in a toast. "To justice," Dr. Thompson said. "To growth," added Judge Fletcher. "To seeing each other clearly," Amy finished. Outside, rain began to fall gently on the garden, washing everything clean for a new day.